Hello and welcome to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gary Morgan. With me, as always, my good friend Jim Stam, sounding a little bit more like himself this week.
I'm doing good, Gary. I just had Ben at the batting cages. I squeezed that in before we got here doing this, and I was afraid Andy Haynes was going to show up, so we got out of there anyway. I didn't want him to get his hands on Ben just yet. So, but no, man, everything's good. Pirates could be doing a little better. I'm looking forward to Skeens tonight. So,
yeah, I'm looking forward to Skeens too. I'd like to see him maybe push back a little bit and look a little bit more dominant again. You know, a little bit less picking around the edges he's been doing in some of his recent outings here. And if that's kind of part of what Grandal is doing with him, I'm not sure I'm interested in it. Like, maybe we need to get him away from Grandal for more reasons than one, right?
well, it's funny you mentioned that because I'm sure you've seen it. The Grandal offensive numbers when he catches for Skeens is totally bizarre. Like the guy can't hit much for anything, but when he catches Skeens, he decides I can hit. It's strange, but yeah. As far as Skeens go, I feel like like Jones, he spoiled us right away, and then no matter how great you are at this game, there's always going to be an adjustment period. His velocity is down just a tiny bit. He's picking a little bit. So yeah, I just want him to I just want to see one of those starts where he just reminds everybody, even when I'm down, I'm still pretty darn good. But this is a reminder of what I am and what I'm going to be next year too.
Yeah. And I think that's something we can definitely look forward to here. Because this show, we're going to end up getting into some pretty big subjects. Ben Cherington, I think there's been a kind of amped up call for his head this week, and I really sat there and looked a little bit at the situation, wrote a piece about it, because I just felt like I needed to sit down and really think about it. This many people start chattering about something, and it's not something that I'm pushing for in my own head or feel anywhere near ready for. It's at least worth examining. There's got to be a reason that everybody feels that ready. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today, Jim. I want to talk about how we've gotten to this point where everybody is so ready to pull the ripcord on this whole thing already. How did we get here? Should we be here?
Well, I think anytime you have a team that drops 10 in a row and then 3-13 down the stretch when people had just got their hopes up a little bit,
right?
I think you are going to see some backlash to that because clearly everybody's been waiting, right? And so then you finally felt like, oh well, maybe they have at least turned the corner into being a 500 or better team. And then when that doesn't happen, it brings up a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Angst about where this thing is headed. And oh my goodness, is this all it was? Is this all it's going to be?
Yeah, I guess I've never gotten there because I feel like most of the sore spots are still sore spots next year. And I basically just want the guy to address them better and let the rest of the kids keep growing, work around that pitching staff. And I just feel like it's still arrow pointed up. I may not think that they've done things the right way the entire way here. I know there's big problems structurally.
Yeah.
I don't like a lot of what I see from the development system. I certainly don't like what I see from the coaching. I'm not saying no changes, Just not sure that I'm at GM level yet.
Well, it's hard to do the GM at this point, simply because you're going to be bringing in somebody that's going to be wanting to do things a particular way, a certain way. That's going to, if they're anybody that has any stature, right? And to get that to blend with what they've already got going, because let's be honest, the pitching looks really good. Yes, they've had some bullpen problems, but we're talking about like the foundation of pitching staffs, right? Like starting pitching. As long as you have that, you have something to work with. It's just that they're so failed on one side of the ball and in pretty good shape in the other. I don't know how you quite pull that off if you're looking to change, quote unquote, regimes. That's the tough part for me.
I mean, I think you'd be asking somebody to come in to an already started house project, and there's materials laying all over the yard. You know, it kind of looks like everything's there. There's a big piles of lumber everywhere, whatever. And then the contractor just up and quits. And he takes all his blueprints with him. It'd be like hiring a new contractor, having him walk in and just be like, have at it. There's no blueprints. I think there's enough parts here. You think you can figure this out? And then the new guy the first thing he'd ask is like, well, I don't know. I mean, what kind of money do I have if they're not all there? And, you know, and I need to buy more parts. And I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm just walking into this blind. The owner has to change something there, right? That's not going to happen with a new GM. You're going to get somebody that's going to want to do something to put their stamp on it and or call whatever's going on a failure and just pull the ripcord, which I can't. I think this fan base would truly be gone forever if you started talking about like trading guys like Brian Reynolds, who is inked, that would get a market.
Yeah, no, you would have to be having someone that's willing to come in and try to finish the job in a way that he feels he can get them over the hump. And then you need assurances from Bob Nutting that he's going to do what a GM with any kind of stature is probably going to say which is we need an infusion too of some money to fill this thing out. You can't just pour syrup on what and make it pancakes. Like you're going to have to get something outside of the organization. I don't know that a GM is really going to be interested in that, even though there is the pitching here.
That's my thought too. I think you'd find somebody. There's only 30 of these jobs, right?
Sure.
But I would want somebody that's going to kind of push, the owner to allow payroll to go up in order to make revenues go up. And I don't know that that's going to come from a GM. Do you know what I mean? Like, my problem is the root of all evil here is the owner. The GM right now, I'm evaluating a job he's done, knowing that that what he has to spend. And I don't even care about the reporting discrepancies there.
Yeah,
we know it's limited. So right. There's only so much you can actually buy. Now, is he picking the right things? I don't know. I don't think so. If I'm him, don't you think like self-preservation kicks in at some point? Like you look around at what you've put money into and what it's doing and what it isn't doing. Do you,
I'll tell you
ever think to go and get a professional?
Let's take our break because there's a lot with this, right? With this topic. So let's do our break and then we'll come back. I do want to talk about payroll a little bit.
Yep. How about it?
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
All right, welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Gary and Jim with you. All right, we already started like kind of just going toe to toe about some of the GM stuff. Let's go ahead and take it the rest of the way, man, because I think that's the first thing I want to knock out before we start talking about all the necessary changes that we know we see. I just want to kind of focus on nailing down the GM level. Are we ready to move on from this GM and all the implications surrounding it? Like what we think that brings to this team, what we think that would look like. Are we okay with that right now? Do you feel that's where this team's at, where they need that kind of a directional change?
I think if they were to completely bottom out the rest of the way, then I think you might have to have that conversation. And I mean disaster stuff, right? Another 10-game losing streak. Just really bad. I think next year, if we're having the same conversation, then I'm more willing to do that. I think you could start with Haynes easily. I put Shelton third in this whole discussion, or fourth if you're counting Bob Nutting in here too. I mean, could Derek Shelton be better at what he does? I'm sure he could be. Do I see it as he's the missing piece that if we just switch him out, things are magically going to get better? No, I don't. I'd start with Andy Haynes first. I'd give Ben Sherrington this year, this offseason, and then I'm ready to have that conversation. And I hate to do that because, you know, it's been long enough, Gary, that I think we should be seeing more on the field success than we have. But for the reasons we just talked about in the first segment, I struggle with how would you even pull that off right now?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's time to kind of get Ben Sherrington a little bit of directional pushback, if you know what I mean. Okay, like I think Derek Shelton has been a good soldier. I'm holding on to the GM this year. I just do not see a change right now being smart. I think forcing him to change things underneath him or recognize that there's some issues, that sort of thing has to happen. Or yeah, you need to have that conversation, because I don't know how you look at what's happening in the system and everything and 100% just go, yeah, we're going to keep going with everything we got here. You know?
Right.
To me, it starts with Derek Shelton. I haven't been ready to fire him, but this last month or so, I think I've seen enough. I've seen enough of a lot of things. And one of them, I think, is Derek has been a really good soldier. He's told the story just about how he was asked to. He smiled most of the time when he did it. I mean, that's what a good starter coach does, Jim. We both knew that at some point he was not going to be able to outlive the stink. You know, the GM at some point has to shed his protective blankie of a yes man and hire someone who's going to push back on him a bit. It's uncomfortable, but a good manager wants people that push back on them. You have to have a guy at field level that is not so used to nodding along with the plan that he's forgotten how to detect and call out bullshit when it needs done. And that's what I think Derek Shelton is right now.
That's
so
a good
programmed
point.
to say yes that he doesn't even know how to tell his boss he's being stupid anymore. And you have to have that.
I mean, it's a fair point. You know, there are certain then you go into my brain immediately starts going to who are the type of guys that you would want to bring in to do that. I think that list is shorter than it has ever been in Major League Baseball. So I think that's a problem right there.
I'll tell you what it isn't for me. It's not pretending that Andrew McCutchen can retire and become the head coach. It's not pretending that Jason Kendall can do it. It's not pretending that because they've been here as a player, they should be the coach.
No, you need somebody that's going to come in that has some chops.
You're not going to get like a Dusty Baker, but you know, you could do worse than, I mean, geez. Who is out there? Joe Madden?
That's what I'm saying. Like, whenever you really start to think about, like, I think the type of guy we're envisioning.
I just want a guy that every once in a while is going to be like, listen, I know you want to see this guy, but like, this is a real important stretch of games, and I need this guy in here. Sorry. Like, not this week. We'll do it when it makes sense. You know, I'll get you the advice, but not right now. You know, like, that's I need to see in that dugout, I think, because even right now, you know, you got somebody like Billy McKinney up here. I think we're going to end up finding out that this was mostly like a nice story because he's from Dallas and they were giving him a thank you for well fought service year award, you know?
Right.
But, which I'm fine with most of the time, but not when you're trying to recover from a 10-game losing streak, you know?
Yeah. My hope is on that side of things is that once September rolls around, they do finally get to making a couple of those moves.
But don't you want a coach right now that's like, read the room, bro? No. Like, we need help up here. You know what I mean? Like, at least get me Sparkplug Palacios back.
Yeah, I think Derek Shelton is much into the role of servitude, right? He does not have, I don't think, the say in the room that you would like him to have. I think the other issue is if Shelton can't do it with Ben, well, Bob Nutting sure doesn't seem like the type that's going to want to do it. You know, he's not going to. Is he going to walk in there and say, "You've got to get rid of Haynes. We've got to do something on that side of the ball"? I don't see it. I mean, the Rooneys did it eventually with Ben Roethlisberger, right? They finally
he's
told
the one
Tomlin,
that dropped the axe on Clint Hurdle. That happened before Huntington.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and that's another thing people keep saying, like, oh, well, he'll never eat the money. He already did it in 2019. Like, there's plenty to crap on Bob Nutting about. Like, you can do accurately a lot easier than making stuff up. The guy will eat the contract that we don't even know the length of in the first place. For all we know, Ben Cherington doesn't have a contract next year. You know, I mean, we have no way of knowing that.
Yeah, someone asked me that the other day on Twitter. I said, I have no idea what his contractual situation is, and I don't think that information is even available. So,
yeah. So I mean, regardless of that, I just don't think like that I'm at that level where I want to make that move yet. I want to see a little bit more of some of his draft product kind of come up. You know, we've just gotten into tasting that a little bit. And honestly, some of that flew through the system. Like Paul Skeens has no business being here in a normal draft year. You know, Jared Jones flew here. Henry Davis flew here too, probably too fast. You know, Nick Gonzalez just got here and now he got hurt right when he was like starting to kind of get his sea legs up here.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's a little bit of patience that I personally have there. Where I don't have patience are the things that I don't think they control very well. Like David Bednar was dealing with crap this spring injury wise, and the way that they handled him to me was irresponsible to the player and the team. That would be the sole reason you went and got a guy like Aroldis Chapman, so you wouldn't be forced into doing something stupid like that. And they did it anyway, and I think he's been paying for it all season long. I'm not claiming he's injured now, but he's never been right this whole year. And then you've got the other situation with Brian Hayes. Same thing. He's been visibly hurt for a long time, Jim. I mean, we've been talking about it week after week on this show. He can't swing. We've said it ourselves long before Brian Hayes did. that he wasn't able to turn on balls. Know how we knew? Because it happened the year before. How are we like so woefully prepared for it? And then when we did get prepared for it by bringing in a guy like Isaiah Kanafalefa, we don't use it. We just keep sticking with it. I mean, what are we doing? Like, those are the kind of things where, like, I want my GM to be a little more agile. Joey Bart's a great example of the opposite. Pounced on something to fill a need real quick.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the bottom line is you know, it's a GM with a very mixed track record. So, you know, should any of that surprise us with Ben Cherington? I don't know that it really should. You know, I don't think his resume is all that super impressive to begin with. So when it comes to things like the Hayes situation, or what they do when they finally do acquire somebody to fill in at certain times, you know, they're head scratchers. But Cherington has always kind of been a guy that seems to be incredibly patient and incredibly committed to whatever he thinks is best.
And incredibly loyal to the people that work for him.
Yes.
But that's where an owner does need to step in and make sure that that loyalty makes as much sense as you think it does after you've been threatened.
Well, you really don't want to. Right. And Gary, isn't it like this in everything? Like, if you are in a position of any type of managerial or leadership roles, if you want to surround yourself with yes people, the odds are that sooner or later that is going to catch up with you, right? It's going to. You need people to be able to give their honest opinions, question what you do at times, push back at other times. You know, like Doug said, I'm not sure that GMBC wants to be questioned. Well, he probably doesn't. But a good GM in that situation has people around him that can do it, feel that they are able to do it, and then that GM will listen when it's warranted. I don't know that they have that situation here.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
You and I both have talked to people, you know. I'll stop short of saying Ben Cherington's arrogant, but he's a self-assured guy, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And that's great and all, but you better have results with it too.
I mean, on a team like this, nobody is going to ask their GM to come in and do all this faster than it takes to realistically see a handful of your draft picks. It's just never as simple as this dumb guy couldn't win with $200 million. Let's replace him with the next guy who can spend that money and win. That's not the type of organization this is. And that's the kind of decision an organization like this is probably not going to make in year 5 of something like this. They're signing on for something they know is going to be X amount of years. And I would bet Ben Cherington probably has until realistically 2027 or 2028, unless they get into some kind of a scuffle as to like not wanting to replace coaches and Bob thinks it's time and he's that loyal that he'll die on that cross, then guess what? That will happen. But if he does what he needs to do and fires his starter coach and replaces them and gets a little bit more backward accountability into that area of things, he'll save his job and he'll be safe to see this thing through for a minute, I think.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is he going to be forced to make any changes, or will he willingly do it? And then secondly, you know, I do think that as a GM, and it'd be the question the next GM wants to be answered too, is, you know, are we going to be putting any more money into this thing at the major league level? Or is this kind of it? You know what I mean? Like, are we going to be a $85 to $100 million payroll and that's what we're going to have to do it with, and so only Bob knows that.
No, Math knows that's not possible. So,
well, it
Math
doesn't mean
knows.
he doesn't mean he's not going to do it, though.
He would literally have to start trading off then next year. O'Neal Cruz got to go. They can't afford his arbitration if your scenario is true.
Well, let's put it this way. Let's say
Math will put them over 100 next year.
Right.
Guaranteed.
But okay. But is that counting with Chapman off the books too?
Yeah. Because they'll respend it. They'll respend their free agency.
They should think about bringing Chapman back, by the way.
They should probably think about spending a little bit more in free agency if the budgeting holds the way we've been told it does. But it'll go over 100 next year. It just has to. And then the year after that, maybe 115. I'm talking like if he doesn't have any oomph, just arbitration is going to drag it there.
Right. Well, that's going to put them back to their 2015 levels.
Yeah.
At that point.
Which he's done before, so why wouldn't he do again? And there should be a little bit of inflation adjustment even for somebody like him. So, I mean, like, I'm talking bare minimum investments from him, like just sticking with arbitration. I'm not like sitting here going, oh, yeah, he's finally going to pay. I'm not. Just arbitration is going to drag them there. And the few contracts that they do have on the books, it's going to happen. Math is going to take them there. And he's going to want praise for it. But he ain't doing anything except just doing the bare minimum baseball allows, plus a little.
I don't know how a GM survives that way. You would have to be so perfect at the end of the day to get where you wanted to go. I just don't know how a GM does it.
Yeah, I don't either. It's a hard job. I think it takes somebody who's willing to eat spoonfuls of crap, and deal with it and never point upstairs when there's a reason something stupid had to happen. You have to act like I thought it was smart to trade this star for these prospects,
Right. Right.
I don't think anybody wants to do that. That said, he was brought in to oversee players that he didn't care about purposefully, because that's how you rebuild. You bring in a new GM that isn't emotionally attached to anybody that's on the team to have a fresh look at it and sell it off without care. A GM tends to not oversee their own deconstruction. So like, that's why I feel like the story arc for him is probably 27, 28, somewhere in there. But like, I feel like that he's going to get a shot to at least finish climbing the hill before we see if he can or can't tip it over.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is like, how does he get there in that time, whatever it is, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, when things are so lopsided right now? And you don't have just the checkbook to go out and fix it. So how do you even get there, Gary? And then, oh, by the way, other problems have popped up along this year that make you start to really be concerned about it, right? I mean, whether it's great, you have some options with the bullpen, but your back end is not looking good. You don't know what that's going to look like next year. Chapman's gone. Bednar, we don't know what's going on with him. Hayes' situation. We still don't know about Henry. We still don't know about him.
For sure.
There's
definitely problems. I'm not saying it's like a sure thing. We've talked about like the thing that kind of makes you really optimistic is the rotation and the options in the rotation. That really is it. The hitting didn't come along this year. That said, if you're a GM, you allow this hitting to go on the way it has for 3 years.
Yeah.
Now, of all the things and all the reasons people want to get rid of Ben Cherington, to me, that's the most valid, is to just watch a hitting program utterly fail for years and never, ever do anything about it and have it be the same things over and over again, strikeouts and just terrible situational hitting and trying to take too many pitches. And trying to drag down starters that are already being intentionally drug out of games early. Like,
and on top of all this, the development of not really producing anything from the minor league system as far as the hitting goes.
yeah,
You know, as you implement this approach,
well, that's all the way they're
throughout
structured.
the
That's
levels.
all right there under the same silo. So again, I go a little further up to Derek Shelton because, hey, former hitting coach is overseeing that operation, right? And he's vouched for the guy. And Ben Cherington has gone along with it and vouched for him as well. But Ben Cherington's got a couple people that can fall on a sword before he has to. This one has to go this year. Has to. We said it last year. We said it the year before. It has to. There's no excuse for striking out as many times as they do against guys that aren't even strikeout pitchers. You know what I mean? I don't even know how you address that. You don't even have some of your worst strikeout offenders here. Like Jack Sawinski's not even here.
Right.
You know, like this is pretty awful.
Yeah, and then you get to the point of, you know, let's say you do make a change with Haynes or your organizational philosophy. You know, how quick does that happen? You know, to see things. You know, it doesn't sound to me like it's a super easy fix. I mean, one, you got to have some players. Two, you got to be able to develop them, and you got to be able to implement whatever you're going to do. You know, but clearly, what has been going on for 3 years now with Andy Haynes is it's just flat out not working. It's just not working.
At some point, it doesn't even matter why it's not working. It just isn't working. When that is the case, you have to at some point fire the figurehead overseeing it, right? Like self-preservation ought to kick in here. Somebody should be telling him, you're not coming back with this same hitting thing, are you? Like,
yeah.
You know, just want you to know, Bob texted me from the bathroom. That would be a bad idea. I don't know. Do with that what you will. And that's all that has to happen. There needs to be a nudge here, man. Like, loyalty's cool, but being stupid isn't. And I don't know. It's last in the league a couple years ago. I think it was second to last year. It's like fourth to last this year. This is while you're adding talent.
And you're supposed to be building towards something.
Yeah.
You know, I think like even if you look at it from just this season and you try to say, well, who could you point to give some credit to Andy Haynes? And it's tough. I mean, did they do anything with Joey Bart when he got here? I don't know. You know,
I don't know. His swing is anything but traditional. He doesn't follow through his swings at all. It's super weird. They were talking about that on the broadcast, that it's his mechanism to keep his hand from turning over. You know, so he just doesn't follow through. Like I've seen people do that same thing with golf before. That's certainly not an Andy Haynes looking hitter. And I don't mean like results. I mean like that's not something that he is known for coaching. You know, like,
you know, I would really like to know what's been the difference there, or if it's been anything coaching related with him.
Probably just that he's a catcher, and because they don't think catchers can hit here, they didn't even bother even trying to talk to him, and like all of a sudden he's up there hitting.
You know, you could point to maybe O'Neal Cruz doing stuff with lefties. Have they helped him there at all?
I kind of felt like he had started nailing that in 2022 before, you know, the season ended, and then you know, we didn't get to see it in 2023. So I feel like he's kind of just gotten back to where I felt he was towards the end of 2022.
Yeah, all I'm trying to do is even point to anything that you could say you know, is a feather in his cap, and they're so small, or you can't even say, "Yep, that is definitely something he did," or "Look at this guy when he finally got to Pittsburgh, how different he looks." They're doing something with Triolo. It still looks gross to me. So, you know, I
I
don't
don't
know.
like it either. I just said that the other day. I said he is making better contact, but
It's still the weirdest.
it's the weirdest looking swing ever, right? It almost looks like
It's
he's ripping his groin out. Like his foot is so planted. He just like there's something awkward there,
yeah.
right?
They got him leaning back a little bit more. I've noticed his weight has shifted a little bit more, but the guy just doesn't have a really nice swing through the zone to begin with. I guess at this point with Triolo, you gotta try something, right? Michael
But
Taylor certainly bottomed out when he got here.
here's one. Alex says trade Bednar and Hayes for a big bat. I wonder why you might pick those two players. I wonder what other teams might think when you try to trade them for said big bat. I wonder if they might be willing to do that.
All the ladies are clamoring for the Bednar Hayes addition to their ball clubs right now.
Yeah, it's classic though, because that is what people think. They suck here so bad that you want them off the team, but you think that they're going to net you some giant fish from someone else that is too stupid to have seen the Pirates or have any video of them playing.
Well, you know what? I got news for everybody. If they're going to add anything, it's going to cost them some pitching to do it. It just flat out is. They'd have to move some of this pitching to get it.
All right, I think we nailed Cherington pretty good. We talked about what we think his shortcomings have been, things we need to see improve from him specifically. And I think we've pretty well covered whether we think they're going to move on or even whether we think that we're ready for them to move on from that. When we come back from this break, let's do your poll question. And then let's read through some people's responses to the poll question and maybe talk a little bit about what we think might be fireable offenses for Derek Shelton. What do you say?
Yeah, let's do it.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
All right, welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. Jim, before we get to the poll, let's do this one question here from Ryan. Maybe it's not Ryan,
Yeah.
RV
No,
fan.
I saw this, though. It was a good one.
Just joined. Apologies, blah, blah, blah. What are our thoughts on Bednar staying in the closer role? Yeah, I mean, I gave a lot of these last week, but I think, to me, you can't have an analytics-based team that believes super, super strongly in analytics and then ignore the most basic analytic of all, that this dude's getting hammered. You know, like, it's funny because he's got this old school belief that you have a closer's mentality or a certain type of guy that has to be the closer. And yet he just is ignoring a 6 ERA. It might be now. You know,
Yeah.
It's a guy that's been struggling for the better part of the year. You know, he's watched him be an all-star 2 years straight. So you'd think he ought to know when he does and doesn't look right. Right?
Sure.
This is probably, to me, one of the most fireable offenses that they've had all year is the overall handling of Bednar. And especially right now with the way that he's performing, the constant just trotting him out in the same exact role, expecting a different result. it's not fair to him. It's certainly not fair to your team that you're asking to fight. You know,
Yeah.
that to me, it's just paralysis. He doesn't know what to do, and he just is frozen. Just do the same thing.
Well, it's especially egregious when you see how Chapman has looked this past month. You know what I mean? Like you legitimately have a guy that can go in and take that role in the meantime. You know, is he perfect for it? No, because along with the good Chapman will come stretches of bad Chapman. But if you'd have just made that switch, Gary, if you'd have just flip-flopped those two, we're probably talking 3 games difference right now.
Yeah.
You know, and when you have a guy sitting there like that and just the refusal to let him do it, I agree with you. I think it's been unfair to Bednar too. Like, and the question is, would you take him out of the closer role? I mean, what I would do this year is I would take him out of it. I would put him more in some lower leverage situations, maybe try to let him do the 6th or the 7th, and then go into next year seeing how he looks. That's exactly how I would handle it. You know, and with no guarantees that he's ever going to be back in there, and see how it looks once spring training comes around and see what he looks like.
Yeah, I think the most dangerous thing they could do really is a half-assed demotion. Like, meaning if you just flip him and Chapman, you have not really done anything
No,
to alleviate the issue.
that's exactly why I
Yeah.
said you put him down even a little bit further and just, hey, catch your breath, man. Like,
Yeah.
let him catch his breath.
And I like Chapman in the 8 spot anyway. I actually think he's traditionally kind of been almost better there.
I agree. I think
And
Nicholas
Kyle
is
Nicholas is a guy that could step in, right? And I think we've seen Carmen Baczynski's capable as well when he's healthy. So that's a couple guys. Holderman, I think you and I both still believe in, even though he's certainly struggling. But I think long term, we also think there's, if you want to go back to coaching decisions, we both feel there's a reason Colin Holderman kind of broke down the way he did. And it's because he came into camp, got sick, started late, and then Derek Shelton rode him like a ragged glue factory ready horse.
Yes, he was.
I think he pitched 36 games out of like 50 some.
Matter of fact, we mentioned it on the show. His usage was surprising given that he missed the beginning of the season.
Yeah, so and in that show, I remember you were calling out like you were a little worried about that and you wanted them to back off of it now that Chapman had started looking right.
Right.
And they didn't back off of it. In fact, they only started using him more and more, and he just fell apart. So
it might be wise to give Nicholas a little look. Look, you never know how these are big boy roles, right? Like the 7th, 8th, and 9th, you have to have a certain type of resilience and mentality, even more than other, bullpen roles. You never know how someone's going to respond to that. Does Kyle Nicholas have the stuff to do it? Yeah, I think he does. But if you need to get a look at that a little bit, I think too, though, to see how he responds to it.
Yeah, I mean,
aren't cut out for it.
I think we saw earlier in that Paul Skeens start at home the way he just lost handle of everything that he threw for, I think 5 batters in a row. That hasn't cropped up again. His numbers are extra crazy when you think about that game and a couple others like it before he really caught his footing. But
it was a turning point for him confidence-wise too. Like he got past that and then settled in. But this would be another test for that, though, right? Because pitching the 6th or 7th, great. That's one thing. Coming in and not having to do it in those situations is another. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying, like, to just assume, like, oh, well, he'd be the guy.
Sure.
I don't know if it's that simple.
I'm sure it's not. We're fans. We're going to oversimplify, but like,
Right.
it just feels to me like it's one of those things that it would be good to get eyes on it this year if you can. And I
sure.
think we probably should be seeing them take advantage of things like that. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about your poll because I thought it was interesting. The results, it didn't surprise us, the results, but it disappointed me anyway.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, like I do think a lot of people were saying if you got rid of Sherrington, then everybody goes. And if you're unhappy with everything, then that's the easiest fix for you, right? That like you clean house because you're going to bring in a new GM. GM's going to want to bring in, so on and so forth below him. So I think like people were trying to say like, oh, well, that takes care of everybody. I don't have to worry about it. Well, I think we just talked about the problems that can come with that if you do
Sure.
that. So anyways, we got 456 votes out of it. And it was close. I mean, really close. Sherrington got 38% of the votes. Andy Haynes got 34%. And Derek Shelton got 29%. It's interesting because I did think Shelton maybe would get a little bit more blame. I thought maybe he'd get more, but it just goes to show you how differently people are viewing this. So, I mean, what did you take away from it, Gary?
I mean, I felt like if you pick anybody other than Sherrington, then my mind went right to Shelton because he oversees both of them, and I know I'll get rid of two of them with that choice. I'm pretty sure that's why some people chose Ben Sherrington, because it would get rid of all three of them. And even though your poll specifically said you could only get one, but I think people still saw it in a certain way, and I did too, even though I read it. Haynes would be my pick if I only got to get rid of one. I think he's the biggest problem that they have. I think Derek Shelton makes mistakes, but I honestly think, and this is going to sound stupid, but I honestly think Mr. Ed could coach this team next year if they had the right pieces, and it would get where it's supposed to get. I just don't think that there's a whole lot that a coach does anymore in Major League Baseball, at least as far as what we really think they did back in the 80s and whatnot.
Sure.
I just don't think that same thing is happening anymore. I don't think that there's a guy that is feeling the room and, putting a lineup together that feels a certain way. And I just don't believe that sort of thing anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if you're expecting Sparky Anderson to walk through that door, I think those days are long gone, or the Lou Pinellas of the world. Yeah, I will say, like, my choice is Haynes, just simply because if you only get one, my goodness, do you have to try to adjust the hitting? You have to. Like, this can't get any further than it is if you don't fix the hitting on some level. And I tend to agree with you. I do think you could pick pretty much anybody and bring them in next year as a manager, and it's not going to look any worse.
I honestly think just about anybody that you hired, like we were kind of brain farting on names earlier. Like, let's say like a David Ross. He had a little bit of success. You could probably pull a guy like that in. I think he'd probably look at his team and feel like he had a lot of parts. That's what I think he'd feel right now. Something he could probably do something with. It's probably an attractive job. It'd be nice to be able to pull some levers like Jarrett Jones and Paul Skeens and the like, in your rotation, and use those parts and see what you can do. I think you could find a good coach pretty easily. The hitting stuff, I don't even know how quickly that affects anything.
Yeah,
some of these guys came up through this system. It's going to be hard to break them out of that stuff if it's in there.
Well, they're
Yeah.
either not good enough or they're not developed enough. And either way, it's a big problem when you have a short window to forget window time frame to try to get it moved in the right direction.
I think a lot of the
So-
time we blame like scouting because like these guys end up going somewhere else and they don't play there either. You know, like when was the last time you heard an update on what Travis Swaggerty's doing? You know, how about Will Craig?
Well, yeah. I mean, can you think about if you went the last who in the last 5 years as a hitter are you wishing that, boy, we let that one get away?
Not really. Not yet. I've seen guys that like I don't feel like they've given much of a chance to. But then again, they go out elsewhere and they prove, hey, maybe nobody's going to give them a chance, and maybe there's a reason for that.
Austin Meadows.
Well, Austin Meadows had different issues, though. You know that I think ultimately,
I just say
Austin
that
being a
because
good player.
yeah, yeah.
But like, yeah, I get it. It's just some guys like they're just not ever going to be good. You know, like Cole Tucker maybe has found himself a bench role in Anaheim or whatever. That's more than I thought he was going to get. I really mean that. But like,
It's not a pretty pitcher.
yeah, look, Kevin Newman's still floating around out there somewhere. And would I be able to tell you like that's a success? Number one pick still floating around like 10 years later? Yeah, it is. It actually is.
Yeah.
But like they're not producing like stars, man. And like that's an issue. And
yeah, and let me just I thought this was a good comment. David at Battle and Bucks said about the poll he just said. He says, I guess Haynes, he said, Shelton may not push the right buttons, but so many of his buttons are broken. A new manager won't help much. Sherrington wouldn't be bad, except I'm not ready to give up on this pitching yet. And a new GM inevitably starts at least a mini rebuild.
Yeah, I feel very similar to that.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty well thought out comment, which is like, you know, mini rebuild. I don't think anybody here has the patience for even that.
I don't either, but I mean I think that we would remember it differently if it was more like MLB player for MLB player. You know, if it was some kind of like a shuffling of the deck where you move out some major league player for some other major league player at a different position because you've got two here or something.
Right.
I don't see any place where they have overflow like that. I see like, you know, potential spots where it could crop up, but it isn't there yet. Certainly. They don't have too much of anything offensively except for strikeouts. You know?
Yeah. Well, and that's like the thing that also too I was curious is because I've heard some people saying about like, well, just move on from Hayes at this point. I mean, if you did that, I mean, you're not really gonna you're not gonna get what you'd hope to get for him. Certainly not with all the questions going on with his back. So isn't your best bet to just hope that they can get the back fixed and that he can return to at least baseline close to average at the plate?
I mean, the way I see it with Hayes, they have two options. One, they can trade him for next to nothing to somebody that wants to deal with the back issue, and you know, just have him play every once in a while, you know, or 3-4 times a week. Just eat it. It's a bench guy for you, a real good defender when we put him in there. Probably has a decent career like that. You can probably get something for him, but I don't know that you get much. You can do that. You can hope that you nurse the back better next year and they come up with some kind of magic maybe Flex Seal will come out with some kind of joint regenerizer thing that you just shove into someone's back and pump it full of foam filler so that he can stand out there and swing. whatever the hell happens, I don't want, and don't play like I was Trump and told you to inject bleach with that either. Don't cut that up, YouTube. Don't you do it. I'm just saying, like, if they would invent something that would really help his back, okay, cool. Other than that, man, teach him to swing easy and take those singles to right and do it all day long. That's what you are, a singles hitter who can steal some bases every once in a while, because that didn't seem to aggravate his back. Turn into a singles hitter.
I think they're stuck with him. I think that's your best course of action. That's just my opinion. I know a lot of people are done with it, but I don't see it other than clearing the money off the books. I don't see it helping them much.
Can I tell you the absolute truth? And you'd hate me as a GM. I've said that a million times on this show before, right?
Yeah.
People would hate me as a GM. If he did go on a tear, like next year, like say he feels better, like he does in spring sometimes, and the back looks good and he's hitting home runs and everything, right? Let's say he goes off in like April and May, June. I trade him right then and there to somebody. I'm like, he's fixed. And I trade him.
Good.
And I trade him right then and there. And I trade him for, I don't care, a first baseman, an outfielder. I don't care. Something major league ready. I give him away in a way because I know it's going to come back. But that's how I get out of it. I try as hard as I can to find a way to sell high on the guy.
Well,
I create it if I have to.
Rob said it's what the Rays do, and you know what? They're pretty good at knowing when to move on, right?
I'm just saying that's a guy that, like, as soon as you have an opportunity to get out of that, get out of it. I mean, I'm really there. I don't see the offensive potential coming back enough for me to care about, and I don't trust the back to stay hot. I just don't. Even if they get it okay, I don't expect it to be good. I have a lot of friends with back problems, man. Like, and I've had back problems myself. I don't have what he's got, and I can tell you there's days I can't get off the floor, man. Like,
yeah. Well,
it's
I mean, baseball and a back is just the worst combination. Like so he's somebody that are they willing to go through another year of him playing like this?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
you know that, and I know that.
Yeah, I think they are.
I also think like there's really no other even classy way out of it. I think like you gotta at least come in like that. They do have a nice insurance policy, I think, with IKF and Nick Gonzalez both being capable of playing there. Triolo, if this swing change that we both think still makes him look like ET in the batting box works, then okay, maybe he's a guy too.
I just had a horrific visual that's far too accurate.
Right. I'm just saying, like, there's stuff coming in. Brannigan is a guy that I think is interesting. Malcolm Nunez, I suppose, could still turn into something at some point. Maybe he's a late bloomer. But I don't know. There's got to be something that comes along and pushes him aside. I think they're going to go in next year expecting him to be the third baseman, though.
Yeah, I agree with you, and hope that he whatever they can do to address it in the off season is going to make a difference.
Yeah, because clearly what you've brought in enough to insulate it if he isn't.
Right.
Because dropping back to IKF is not nearly the same as dropping back to Jared Triolo. You know what I mean?
Certainly.
And
it's just funny, Gary, because as it just all this stuff that's popped up this year. You got the Cruz discussion. Did Rowdy do enough this year? Were those 2 months enough? Because he still isn't perfect. Boy, there's a lot to look at.
There really is. I think though, decided pretty much GM staying. Coach, we're both, I think, ready to move on. Right?
Yeah, I think I would go Haynes first because I just see that as critical mass stage. But I could be talked into Shelton at this point.
I only really have one concern with moving on from Derek Shelton, and you're probably gonna laugh at me. I don't want to lose Oscar Marin. And I think you would. And I really think he has done great with the pitching program. So I don't, even guys like they bring off the heap, like Dennis Santana, like has come along, you know. I don't blame him for like David Bednar falling off a cliff. I just don't.
No,
I'm sorry, I don't.
Those relievers are not something that you can judge people on.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
To me, the starters have had their innings managed well. They're all relatively healthy. I know Jared Jones is on the IL, but they've all avoided catastrophic injury. They've all kept their innings in check to the point where they're still, viable should there be a reason to be at the end of the season. I think he did a really good job of managing that. Next year, I'd love to see what he can do without the gloves being so tightly laced. There's a little bit more room with some of those guys next year, and it's different if you're like sprinkling in a Bubba Chandler as opposed to two rookies and a kind of pseudo veteran like Bailey Falter who hadn't done it at this volume ever. And Luis Ortiz is picking up innings here and there. I'd like to see what he can do with a little bit more leash on some of the innings next year. I've just really thought the pitching program has been really solid from top to bottom in the organization. It's the polar opposite of the hitting program. And I don't want to lose that. So what I would hope is like if they fired Shelton, they take Oscar Marin and they go, okay, you're out of the dugout, but I still want you to be here overseeing this pitching program because it's working great.
Well, as you're talking about this scenario and I've got to admit, being a fan of the Pirates, I know when a manager gets fired from another team. I don't necessarily know how that's handled as far as the staff under you. Can the GM go out and get who he wants as far as a manager, and you can keep the pitching staff? Does that happen?
He just did it when he started here, when he kept the hitting coach. He didn't let Derek Shelton go and pick his own. He kept the hitting coach because the players wanted him, and he didn't really have time to go out and find a better one. So, and Derek Shelton didn't have any strong opinion on it, so they let it go. It can be done. I just think like once it happens, you automatically set up an eventual headbutt situation. I've been here X amount of years and I'm under this guy, all of a sudden things that I thought were right that made them want to keep me, you're telling me aren't right. It starts that kind of thing. I think it's always best to do a clean sweep. And I've thought for a long time the people overseeing these things shouldn't be in the dugout anyway. It's too much for guys to do. Even if you think Andy Haynes was doing a good job, you can't expect him to do that and the dugout. So to me, I get new figureheads anyway. Just put them administratively in charge of it. Let them actually travel up and down the system and do this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly don't.
Not Haynes, let me clarify. But
right, I'm Oscar Marin. I keep thinking about him, and he's certainly somebody at this point. I think he's more than acquitted himself as far as being able to oversee the development in this system. It'd be a shame to lose him at this point.
He's the only coach in the visible top of the system that I think other teams will court.
Right.
I think some people will give Donnie Kelly an interview, but I think people will openly come after Oscar Marin.
Yeah, I mean, he'd be somebody that you'd almost want to say, like, okay, we're going to do this, but this is all set up. This is all, we don't want to change anything on this side.
Eric says, yeah, but the Padres pitching coach was able to correct some small mechanical issues with Martin Perez, and now look at him. Yeah, one start, Eric. I mean,
Well,
Google is free for everybody. Really look at what he's done. He didn't change anything with Martin Perez. It's a 15-year veteran. You don't change anything with a guy like that.
you know what fixed Martin Perez?
Getting out of Pittsburgh.
Facing the Pirates offense.
Facing the Pirates offense, knowing exactly how to get them out from watching them in the dugout, strike out over and over again against the crap he throws. That's what they do terrible against. They just struck out 16 times the other night against it. It's the same exact kind of pitcher. It's a junk baller. It's trash. But anyways, did you feel like therapeutic? Like, do you feel like we kind of helped each other tonight, or did we just incite more violence?
I think what these conversations always do, Gary, is it tells you that, like, if you think it's easy, no matter what you pick, there are things about it that make it more difficult than you might have realized in the first place. Other than Andy Haynes, like,
I think we're both solidified on that one. Yeah. Like, I think like in baseball, I just want to tell a real quick story about what I think it takes so long in baseball to know before you make a move. I know fans can kind of make their decision quickly, but just sometimes, like when you're building a system in your vision, I think you have a tendency to maybe become a little bit of a degenerate gambler, because you're always kind of like adding more money into the pot, trying to actually like make sure that you've supported your investment or your choice enough before you call it quits on something, right? Like, so let's say like you hire like a new international scouting director. The first year, you probably don't think twice about who they pick. You know that the guy's at the mercy of like dropping into a situation he knew nothing about. He's only knows the guys he knew, and they may not be the guys that were scouting here. He probably holds on to the old scouting department, right? Because like he doesn't have time to build that whole infrastructure. He just got hired. First year's a wash. Second year, you finally get that. But you're also in the process of him bringing in his whole new team. And all of those new guys are starting to just plant their little fingers out there and start getting their inroads and start talking to their 13-year-olds that they think can become guys they want to sign in 3 years. And before you know it, 6 years down the road, people are going like, well, what happened to all those changes you were going to make in the international drafting and developing system? Where are the results? And you're going like, I've only really like gotten one draft from them that I liked, and they're all 17.
The nature of that in particular is super, super time consuming.
But you can apply that logic to just about everything you do. You bring in like a new director of player development who's never done this before. He was a mental health coach. You bring him in and he tells you a good story about how he's going to set up a wonderful thing. And you give him a couple years to do it. It's now been 4 years, because you can debate whether it's fair to say it's 5 years for Ben Cherington because of COVID, but there ain't no debate that it's been 4 years for that director of player development.
Yeah.
Because he didn't have an entire system to work with for a year and a half of that sentence. Okay. So how in the world do you look at that and go like, yeah, everything I'm doing isn't working? I don't know. I think you probably should look at the hitting and be like, hey, I should be seeing something, right? But like, where? Because sometimes you do see it in Greensboro. And that's 2 years of development right there.
we could probably get into a conversation of whether Greensboro hurts or helps or confuses things.
Yeah, I'd
You,
say
you
hurt,
know,
but yeah.
yeah, I think it confuses things a little bit, just but from the nature of that part. But I just think we are clearly at the point where you do look at the offensive side of things and you think, boy, there should be some more coming and ready to help. I mean, okay, Tamar Johnson looks like he's turned the corner, still super young. But you can't, you're not playing to 3, 4, 5 guys that you're just like, oh, it's just a matter of time. You know what I mean? Like, we're not pitching. You can say that. I think
Yeah.
I think, which is so weird, Gary, that the thing that I thought would be the hardest to nail would be the pitching stuff. And yet here they are with a ton of it. So,
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of questions. All I'm saying is things in baseball, especially things that are going to be very process driven, they take time. This is just not the same as a team that's going to fix it the way another team would. Like a team that is going to spend money would go out and buy things that will absolutely fill those holes more than adequately most of the time, or at least good swings at it. And they probably do better a lot more often than this team will. This team is they're chumming the water 3 days before the fishing trip to make sure that they catch a couple trout, and then they forget to bring bait sometimes on the actual day of.
or they couldn't afford it.
Yeah, but the problem is it takes you 3 years to get there before you can actually go like, oh yeah, you actually suck at this. That's the problem.
Well, the great thing is if you get a team that does it, I think like what really probably annoys Pirates fans, and I know we have to get going here pretty soon, but is just that they're seeing other teams move along in this process.
Yeah.
Maybe not quicker, but when they do get to this point, you really are starting to see the fruits. Right? Like, has Baltimore won anything yet? No, but the fruits are there. And that's the thing that I think people are starting to panic about. And you know what? Maybe rightly so.
It's funny because we had Jeff Carr on from Locked On Reds here, about a month ago. And we talked about all the similarities, and the teams are right there in the standings. Still, both teams came into this season with more expectation than they've delivered on. Both teams look like they have some things that aren't coming together as they had hoped, right? Like they don't quite have the pitching. We don't quite have the hitting. You almost wish they could just flip-flop a few pieces, but their hitting stinks. I think like the biggest similarity between the two teams so far is just an overt stubbornness to hold on to a coach that isn't performing. David Bell stinks, and so does Derek Shelton. I think has shown the same. You're not doing what you need to do with the talent that you're given.
Yeah, plus David Bell is just an a-hole. At least Shelton seems like a likable guy.
Well, that's true.
If we're splitting hairs here.
If there's anything true there, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, so which is funny because you would think a guy like that would even have a shorter leash, but he's sticking around.
Yeah.
So it's
just funny because I look at their team and I think, man, I get jealous sometimes. I'm like, oh man, I really like some of how their team's coming together, and they got some good pieces here. They really could kind of be coming together. And then I really start looking, and you start looking at those underlying numbers, and they've got a strikeout problem that's almost just as tragic as the Pirates, and they lack fundamentals just like the Pirates, and they don't have nearly the pitching the Pirates have. So then I look like underneath all that and the system that's left, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't feel so good about it. I talk to Reds fans that I'm friends with. They feel the exact same way about the Pirates. on the surface, they're jealous of the pitching staff and stuff like that. And the bona fide outfielder, Brian Reynolds, and they don't have that. So there's a lot of things that I think they think Ellie's way, way, way better than O'Neill, but it's comparable.
Yeah, the biggest thing is both fan bases, I think, were supposed to be right now seeing those expectations turn into something,
right?
And they're just not. So, and I'll tell you too, like both the Reds and even like the Orioles, who I mentioned, their payrolls aren't extravagant, but they are up a little bit more than what the Pirates are doing. So again, like I'm not asking for the moon. I know it's not realistic. I just think that, man, you've got to pour some kind of financial commitment into what you have. And, going back to when this all started, Nutting said when it was appropriate, he would do it. I think we are still kind of waiting on that end.
Okay.
I just think maybe it's time now that it's if it's not appropriate now, Gary, when would it be?
I mean, right now.
This off season.
Yeah, I hate to go back and travel in time, but God Almighty, I did not feel that this team was ready to be really, really added to this spring. I did not think they had the pitching to really, really make a run this year.
I would agree with you. I meant this coming off season.
I got shocked by it though,
and it did too.
I think that I agree, but I think it's kind of like made this timeline so apparent to everybody that it had to be right this second, and I just don't think they were ready for it. I really don't. We'll see this offseason if they're ready for it next year.
Probably was easier said than done. If you were going to do it, you were going to have to force some things to do it, and I don't know that that's ever super prudent.
Yep. I'll just close out the show with, I personally would do it with the new coaching staff in place. I think it's time for the training wheels to come off and some 180 directional criticism to re-enter that locker room. So,
yes, men are good until you need to actually have results.
Yeah. So hey, good show. I think we kept it from sounding like we were talking about climate change or something. But
yeah, I mean, hey, this is the shame of it is you're talking about things that's not truthfully on the field, and I hope we get back to that, Gary. I really do.
Well, I think we're going to force ourselves to next week because there is baseball being played, and if we're not calling openly for promotions from AAA next week, then it probably means they went on a little bit of a tear. So either way, we're going to have a fun conversation next week, right?
Definitely.
All right, let's toss it off to Ben.
Let's go, Bucks!
Yeah, buddy. All right, thanks, everybody.